Yeah, yeah,
Very nice. Very nice. So
yeah.
from like people on my side of the spectrum of human consciousness or social circle, as you want to call it, I want to introduce you. Fatima, you went to uni in Sussex and now you teach at a reputable university, this name I won't take for obvious reasons. And you definitely, I think, have your grip on the pulse of our youth. So I would want you to tell us a little bit about that, because you interact with young people on a daily basis. I'm really interested to know more about that, because some of us aren't lucky enough to do that in our professions.
Are you referring to what you do as an HR? Are you a manager now?
No, far from it, far from it. But I don't get to. I would want to. I would really want to interact with the youth as much as possible, because they're very fresh. They're not as adulterated or as corrupted as we get, and as preconditioned as we get when we keep living in this particular socioeconomic zeitgeist. So it's good to get like their point of view on things from time to time, as I'm sure you know a lot about than I do.
Of course, I totally get that, but I also know that as an HR manager to be, you interact with a lot of people as well. Frankly, I see you in a managerial position if you keep it up, if you want, this is what you want to do, because
Uh,
I was
we'll see.
working where you were working. Uh, you were one of the very few people who were very good at understanding humans, being empathetic, being there for all the other fellow employees, and you did something for the environment of the company. So
In the spirit,
definitely, I have to look forward to.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Like, as much as I would love to hear songs about my praise, but like, because you mentioned empathy there, and that's very interesting. Because I want to know, like, because people have been saying that a lot. So I want to know, like, how you are coping with the whole quarantine situation. How's it going for you?
It's going good, I would say.
Okay.
Uh, if I'm very selfish, because obviously this is tough time, we shouldn't be saying this, but at the same time, I feel like this was a much needed break from everything else around us, for settling our brains down, maybe for thinking straight, and so on and so forth. So I think I'm getting the hang of being locked up at home. This is like a natural grounding situation. Like we did bad things and now we're being grounded for it. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
take it. But of course, there are people whose lives are at risk. We have a lot of other things to consider. It is a health hazard. It's not something that we should be celebrating right now. It's not summer vacations. So yes, those things are definitely there to consider. I would not want to put down how dangerous coronavirus is. So yeah, I think that's my take on it right now.
How
Personally,
would
yeah.
how would one stay sane in a situation like this? Because most of us haven't experienced a crisis like this before, and most of us, being postmodernist, we aren't used to being cooped up in our houses all that much. So how do you stay sane in a situation like this?
I think it's very hard.
Mm,
I'm actually very surprised at how people are taking it. I am very proud of how our situation has been handled by government or by our own small districts. So I think that a lot has been done, and I think that people are handling it really, really well because it is very hard. We saw what happened in Spain and Italy when
oh
people
yeah,
were out on the streets and they could not stay locked up. We saw what happened in some states of America where there was spring break, I think, and some kids thought that they're just wasting their time at home and this is their time to celebrate life. I remember this one girl saying that she's 21 and this is her year and she wants to have fun because this is the only time that she'll ever be 21. And I understand her angst. At the same time, it's also something that is our responsibility to, be safe and keep everyone around us safe too. So we cannot make irrational decisions. We can't just walk out on the streets and start celebrating life just because it's springtime. There is a lot at stake. We should take that into account. I'm very happy with some of my students who have actually taken this staying at home thing very, very seriously. And
mm.
yes, they are coping very well with their online classes, etc. So I think they're doing very well. I'm kind of happy with how things turned out here in Lahore. But at the same time, I know it's very hard. I know that it's killing, especially if you're a very social being, especially if you get your energy from other people, something that I actually I fall in that category. It is hard.
I think
I
most
mean,
of us do. Most of us do. Yeah.
absolutely. So yes, especially in fact, I was looking at a few people's memes situation on Instagram and WhatsApp, and it is very, very sad to see how they're coping with it, especially those who have anxiety issues or mental, you know, I don't want to say disorders. I think it's a very bad word to use, but yeah, who need help mentally to cope with the
Ooh,
situation.
I
So
think I think we've
yeah,
tapped on a reservoir of all these difficulties, of all these cognitive difficulties that can now emerge. Like I suffer from OCD. I have most of my life, and I can understand how people who have cognitive disorders like OCD or hypochondria and stuff like that, how that can
all right.
escalate in a crisis like this. You know.
Yeah. I was actually seeing this one thing about a boy who has ADHD and he
Oh
cannot sit
yeah,
still.
yeah.
So his parents have to do a lot of things to keep him busy and come up with different activities so that he has something to do during this very massive lockdown because again we cannot even make grocery runs on some days. So it's something that we have to do. I hope it's temporary, but even if it isn't, I do think that it has had a very strong impact on how we live life. It has
So as
definitely
much as
changed ways of seeing things. Yeah.
as much as like I would want to appreciate this time in which we can hit pause and reflect back on our ways and all that, we can't possibly be dismissive of all the problems that a lot of people are facing, psychologically, physically, and otherwise. A lot of people are dying or suffering from the virus itself and from everything else that comes with it. Absolutely can't be dismissive of that. You mentioned spring break a little bit, and I remember when I was in uni, there was this constant pressure every time you went out, every weekend or whatever, and this is being recorded on a Saturday. So, but there was this constant pressure that you have to go out and have a good time, no matter what. And you think, in a way, a lot of young people, do you think they're conditioned that way to think that they need to have a good time at certain points in their life?
Absolutely. It's a good time as any for the youth to actually want to enjoy it. They always have. It's not something that it's new for us. Sure, we're the millennials and everybody has this thing that we do not work so hard. We are very lazy. We're very laid back. Um, we hog up Wi-Fi and social media a lot. But
Right.
I don't think that's actually true. We still have that thing where we want our friends around us. We want to rely on a few people in our lives. We are just as social as any other generation has been. So yes, I do think that we are one of those very few generations that has had a lot of labeling done, and because of that,
Mm.
I would say morale has been a little down. But at the same time, I do think that we are very productive with how we use our time. You can see that they're doing amazing, amazing things via technology, and even if not through technology, they're through other means. They are activists. I mean, you have Greta Thunberg, you have so many amazing young people who are doing so much and they understand that this is their time to shine or this is their time to actually wake up and rectify the mistakes of the previous generations. So we can't always say that, oh, we don't do anything or we
I I think millennials are blessed with a lot of technology, a lot of technological facilities. Like I've had this weird fantasy for a while that what if Buddha was a millennial and Buddha had a podcast or a YouTube channel? How interesting would it be for Buddha to reach out to millions of people just like that in his lifetime?
that's
I
actually a
would
very
subscribe.
go
I
on.
would subscribe to the Lotus. I mean, I presumably that would be his YouTube page, a YouTube channel. I would subscribe to it like in a heartbeat for sure. We definitely have that facility. Definitely have that facility as millennials.
What do you know about him? I actually feel like certain people actually had more following because of the time that they were actually born in and time was on their side or their situation was on their
Oh
side.
yeah,
He was a Buddha. I do not know
so
that I ever
true.
find him because it's so much in the middle. There are more distractions now. I do not know many pop stars currently because they keep, um, it's like a big industry. They keep growing. I do not know what's in
It's a rat
anymore.
race.
Very hard to keep track. So would we ever find him on a podcast unless we actually search him by name? I think those are some things to consider because now it's like everything has to
Mm.
be done by everyone has to have a domain, everyone has to have certain things, SEO. It's like very funny how many
Yes.
things that are
Mm.
not supposed to be seen are so widespread and they catch on like fire. And a lot of
Okay.
very interesting things. get sidetracked because of search engine optimization as well as other things. Go on.
That's capitalism for you. That's the kind of capitalist competition that we have in everything. You know, like I was saying this to someone the other day. I was saying, like, if capitalism was so popular back in the day, they would put Dostoevsky in a dark room every single day, and they would ask him to write the likes of Brothers Karamazov, Crime and Punishment on a daily basis. You know, like, you wrote this in a day, wrote twice, something twice as far, the next day and the next day, and so on and so on. And it doesn't work like that. You know, a lot of things, especially things that have to do with human consciousness and organic creativity, you can't really dogmatize them, and you can't systematically produce them. You know, it just doesn't work that way. But that's what we expect in a capitalist society.
Oh, yes. I was actually talking to somebody, I remember, when I had gone for my master's, and she was an undergrad, and she was exceptionally smart girl. So we were actually going around teaching around East Sussex in various different high schools. The aim was to get children to actually like creative writing. And while once I was in a train with her, and she just said that I just want to be able to write really bad erotic literature. And I was like, but you're so more than that. Why would you want to do that? And she said, because it sells. It's easy to produce. It's it's consumed in like large quantities. That's exactly how I can make money. If I write something which is really high standard, if I write something that I actually would want to read, there's a very small niche. I will not be making any money in that genre. So what's the best way to do this? Oh, the best way is to write mass-produced short stories that can sell online. And I guess that kind of struck a chord with me, because UK is pretty capitalist. Not so much as other countries, I admit, but at the same time,
not so much as America, but yes.
Yes, but this was an undergrad girl, and this was her aspiration, because she was realistic enough to know what sells and what doesn't. That was very interesting to note. So yes, you're right. And imagine him writing every single day. It would
and strict.
Go on.
I'm just saying that unapologetic practicalists would have you believe that that's the way to survive in this world. You know, that's the way to be. This girl you mentioned, she reminds me of this character I saw on this TV show, BoJack Horseman. We've talked about it a while ago, a little bit. So there's this character, Diane, who, spoiler for somebody who hasn't seen the show, but she eventually ends up writing a book, which ends up to be like an adult fiction. And that sells really brilliantly. And then her agent asks her to write something like that, you know, write a sequel and so on and so forth. And she doesn't want to, because she feels like she's selling her soul, because that's not her. But her agent convinces her that this is what sells. If you want to be a successful author, you have to write adult fiction, books like that. So it's cool to see how that manifests into real life as well. And that happens. That really does happen. I went to business school for 5 years. God knows I had no interest whatsoever. But I did. Here I am. So, yeah.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, things definitely have changed a lot. I'm sure you went to business school with a certain mindset too, that this might be what is practical, what is necessary. Come to think of it, or actually just mention, I'm just going to mention this. Just yesterday, I finished a course from King's College London on business fundamental concepts, etc. And the reason for why would I, who teaches English in a university, want to take that course is very interesting, because it shows that I know that this is not enough. And it's probably somewhere in the back of my mind that maybe what I have done, maybe what I'm going to do is not enough for me to survive in this world. Maybe there are some ideals that we try to catch, and those things also need to be taken into consideration at times. Because I teach a business school, maybe I thought it was to understand how my students react towards certain things that I say or do. I teach business proposal writing to a bunch of about 57 future entrepreneurs, all brilliant, all amazing, a lot of social businesses in there. So it's not all capitalist, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind that they are here, and making money is a big part of living in this world now. And what do we do with people who do not make enough money? What do we actually say to them?
We ostracize them. We definitely ostracize them, neglect them, negate them.
And it's just like, I actually know that for us, especially in Pakistan, for some reason, economics plays a really big role in how we make friends, who we socialize with, what relatives we actually want to be friendly with based on how much they have, as opposed to those who do not have so much.
Oh yeah.
And you don't really see the human aspect behind relations, which is that everyone, I mean, we are a community, we should be involved in some kind of communal living, but at the same time, that there's this dearth of empathy there too. We do make social connections based on who has what, or where, or what they can offer us,
Mhm.
right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So those are all some things to consider as well. I think it's really sad that we do that. It's really sad that we do not make connections based on who we like, but based on what they have. Uh, so yeah, I think that that's something that takes away from our humanness too.
cut to cut to when the plague hits, right? Cut to us living in quarantine in complete social isolation, just connected virtually, can't go to the mall, can't get those new trainers. Now what do? You can kind of see in a way how abstract consumerism is if you strip down the social aspect from it. Now we've been and the reason why we chase money all that much, why we chase people who have money, is because we've been preconditioned to believe uh, that people who are successful have to have money, have to have some kind of economic domination. Preconditioned to do that, all of us, since our childhood. But when we stripped away of that, then what do you do? That's my main question. That's something that I think existential problem that everybody's facing these days. It's because you can't really now rely on consumerism. I'm not being dismissive of people who have consumerism as the only particular joy in their life, like we were talking about earlier. Like if you're a minimum wage worker and you buy a dress once a month that makes you happy, by all means do it if that gives you pleasure. But there should be more to it, I think, if you want to shy away from just consumerism and just free market capitalism. I think you need a spiritual dimension in your life, maybe some kind of other fulfillment. What do you think about that?
I completely agree with you. I was actually thinking now that every single day when I get dressed for work, there's so many products that I use. I
Oh
get
yeah,
up, I make
yeah, yeah.
coffee, I wear something that my students might like because they or make them more attentive, so brighter colors, etc. Those things I take care of. Then there's obviously some form of cosmetics because as a woman you're supposed to have something on your face if you're going to work. It's a social norm, and all of these things cost a lot of money. And it's more like a personal investment more than anything else. That's how the workplace sees it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really fascinating for me to see that now none of that is important. Now that I'm taking online classes at home, none of that matters anymore. Now it's how I want to represent myself. Now I'm not bound to my
Yeah,
workplace rules. I am bound to a certain time.
yeah.
I am bound to a certain subject. I am bound to impart knowledge that I've normally done on
Mm-hmm.
a day-to-day basis. But now it's become so much more. It's more holistic in some ways too. I find that many students cannot come in on board because, again, their economic lifestyle does not allow them to come on online sessions. They're back home, some of them are back in their villages. They do not have tablets or Android phones to log in. So it's very hard for them. So I have made an exception for them that they do not need to be present. We can just give them notes later. They will have 2 weeks to catch up on everything after 31st of May. While the provisions have been made, they are missing out on a lot just because they do not have the same means. Just because they do not have Wi-Fi at their house, just because they cannot always go around buying mobile data. So those things are all something that we need to take into consideration too. They're again, and they're really just students. They're students on who did really well in school and now on full scholarships. That's how they afford their education here
Mm-hmm.
in Lahore. And now that there's a
Mm-hmm.
complete lockdown, they are even deprived of that education. So we'll have to see and research on what the repercussions of these 2 months are on them. Again, education is also something that is very consumerist. uh, I know some of my students are
See,
actually taking online courses now.
that's the thing. That's the thing. Survival is consumerist if you think about it. Like it's easy for people in a place of privilege to actually contemplate on the quarantine situation and see how we can shy away from consumerism and reflect back on things and so on and so forth. But people who are fighting for survival, for their education, for their food, for shelter, people who need to work on a daily basis, for them, it's a lot more physical, the problem, and less philosophical. Whereas for most of us, it's like that. Um, so, and that's a good question. Like one thing that I want to talk to you about is that I was watching BBC earlier, and it was saying that a couple of hospitals in northern England have closed down because NHS staff, they're protesting A lot of warehouse workers are protesting as well. So where do you stand on people who are at the forefront of this war, right alongside doctors and all that, healthcare workers, storage room workers, people like that, and they aren't getting paid enough. They're not getting their risk funds met, which is like a certain stipulation in the UK that you need to have if you work in a risky job. They're not getting that, and they're protesting now because they want to survive too. So where do you stand on that? Is it some kind of what Lenin called spoiled workers aristocracy, or do you think it's necessary for them to leverage their position in a crisis and get better remuneration, better benefits?
Absolutely.
Remuneration, sorry.
Mm-hmm. I actually noticed there was a report. I think I read it on The Guardian. I'm not sure, but I think it was on The Guardian, where they actually said that a lot of grocery workers now come into care worker category for this quarantine, and they will get the exact same benefits that a health worker might get. And I think that's a very good move too, because
Fair.
at the end of the day, they are risking
Fair
their
enough,
life
fair
just so
enough.
they can come and buy food items and staple. Because nowadays, I actually feel like everyone's very particular about what they're buying. I do not think people are going for luxury items right now. Important goods are more or less off the shelves in Pakistan because of the lockdown. So we don't have enough coming in.
Mm.
I know that I cannot go and buy cat food anymore for my cat because everything's gone. It's off the shelves, whatever he eats. So now we are trying to make him more accustomed to whatever we eat. So those very small things, I think that you see a very big change in what is being purchased in markets. And it's usually very staple things like wheat, rice, vegetables. I don't even see people mentioning fruits. I do not see them mentioning a lot of vegetables, simply because they know that it's hard to get by. So they're just like, and also it is not very. You can't store fruit, right? It rots. It's very. It has a very small shelf life, and I see people are actually going forward with more bigger. Uh, or sorry, I lost my complete train of thought there. Longer lasting shelf goods. For example, I noticed that this one
Yeah.
blogger had actually posted about her shopping list with her husband, and they had so many canned goods simply so they could store it away and pass this month. And I thought that was actually a very big move. I mean, these are people who can afford day-to-day
Of course.
groceries. So, and
Of
even
course.
they can't, even they're shy to do that now. They are some, I actually feel bad for people who have to go and buy their goods every single day, which are our daily wage workers. They go every single
So I
day,
want
they
to say
go with
one
their,
thing. I'm sorry.
yeah, go on.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like, it's fascinating how you mentioned that people are now sticking to the bare bones that they need to survive, like grocery wise,
Hmm.
which is pretty cool because you don't need like not being dismissive of people who have celiac disease and all that, but you don't need gluten-free bread and soy milk and like almond milk, things like that. You can probably more or less do without them. You don't need like free range eggs. Sorry, like I'm gonna be massacred on social media after this, but you don't really need them. And with that happening, with people sticking
True.
to bare bones in their kitchen and big corporations, meta organizations asking for bailouts and state intervening and coming to aid of meta organizations like the Wall Street or British Airways, giving them bailouts, which is something that, according to classical capitalism, state isn't supposed to. So those things combined, so you see, like on a micro level, people rationing themselves in a way, sticking to bare bone meals, and on a meta level, state aiding and providing support to people and aiding organizations, interfering with the economic day-to-day of countries. These two things on a meta and micro level, if you think about them, are in a way negating classical capitalism. Would you call it the death of capitalism, so to speak?
I do not know. But I do remember I saw this meme yesterday which said that it was actually a very harsh meme. It had Stalin on the
Mm.
background and it said, "Welcome to your 30-day free trial of communism." And I thought that was very current situation. Yes, we have had a very big capitalist
Yes.
cleanse, if you think about it. No one's thinking about what they're going to buy for their summer barbecues, etc. They are now sticking to the very
Yeah.
whatever is actually considered necessary. Um, so yes, those changes in are right there. And it's actually kind of sad to see exactly how much this will affect big corporations as well as very small cottage style industries, because no one's really purchasing anything that
Cottages
they do
for
not
sure,
need
yeah,
right now.
for sure,
So
for sure,
you
for
also
sure,
have
yeah.
all of those that it has led to a very big economic crash, maybe. We saw
Oh
what
yeah,
happened with the American
definitely.
Stock Exchange. We saw what's happening in Pakistan right now. So
Flybe, do
many
you
people
remember
are saying that we should actually.
when you were in uni in the UK? I'm sure you must have traveled with Flybe, because it was very, I traveled with Flybe. It's very cheap. Um, so Flybe is like this budget airline for people who don't know. Flybe got bankrupt a couple of weeks ago, and they've shut down completely. And they're not the first. There are a lot of other
Wow.
medium-sized organizations and even MNCs that are closing down, and cottage industries as well, for sure. There's this
Hmm.
contemporary social philosopher, Slavoj Žižek, who's unapologetically a communist. I don't agree with most things he say, but he said something the other day, and I was watching this documentary online, which he said that capitalism, in a way, is dying if not dead. And these bailouts, which are uncommon because they didn't happen in the Great Depression, didn't happen in the 20s and 40s, didn't happen during 2008 economic crisis that are happening now. These bailouts, they're in a way life support. So we're trying to resuscitate and keep capitalism alive a little bit, uh, but we're doing everything that is the opposite of classical capitalism, classical free market capitalism, which is really fascinating, you know.
I totally agree. In fact, Derrida was of the same viewpoint. He thought that communism
Mm.
was a ghost that was in Europe, just waiting to just, be seen. His book Spectres of Marx was unbelievable when I first read it. I think that book is just remarkable. And he talks about this a lot. Europe is very capitalist. They also have a lot of tourists, and that's part of the reason. That's how most of their people make their way in the world or make their money. They don't have much going on except for these very small
For
towns
sure.
which rely really heavily on tourism. Something that Pakistan does not have, except maybe in the northern areas. So those people, I'm sure, are very affected. I mean, summers are around the corner, but nobody will actually be going to the north, and we will not have so many
Yeah,
tourists coming
yeah,
in. Traveling
yeah.
plans have obviously there has been a huge impact on the tourist industry too. So you see all of these things, you see how where we are headed, and yes, capitalism has sort of died at least in the last 1 or 2 weeks. People have only been worried about uh, how much they can store in their houses. And again, I do not think brands were really important. So what if you can't get a certain brand of toothpaste? Just go for the other
You
one,
see
because so
that
many
now.
people are
You see
buying.
that now.
Yeah, we see brands for what they really are, which is
It's
just a name.
okay. It's it's okay to have Tesco's everyday value eggs. It's fine. You don't need those shiny yellow boxes. Dude, I the cool thing that
Can I ask you
comrade
a question? So, how much does a bag of ramen in how much does a like a small packet of ramen cost in Pakistan? Hello.
sorry, a packet of ramen, you said.
I
Sorry.
asked. I asked. What? How much does a small packet of ramen cost in Pakistan? Like actual ramen.
Ramen and I don't know if they actually have real ramen. I think if you go to Al Fateh or some sort,
So we do.
I
It's
know,
in very limited
I know.
stores, mostly purchased online, but it's 1100 rupees a packet. And if you remember, in the UK, you had the exact same one for £1, and it would actually make a whole meal. So imported goods in Pakistan, that's a discrepancy between
Avocado,
one.
avocados, mate.
Oh
Avocados.
yes,
Somebody told me in Pakistan they cost like around 1,000 rupees, which is like a big amount in Pakistan. In the
a thousand
UK,
rupees for
avocado, you can get an avocado, decent sized avocado for like a quid
mm-hmm,
50. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
mm-hmm.
So
And
one
you could actually
interesting
get.
thing that comrade I want to say one thing. Comrade Britney Spears said something that's really interesting. She said there should be universal welfare and universal healthcare for everyone, which blew me
Mm-hmm.
away because you don't expect, and I'm not being disrespectful in any way. Like I really liked Toxic Theatre when I was younger, but I mean, even naive pop stars like her, even they are waking up to the realization that we don't really, that the kind of dominance hierarchy that we live in, it doesn't really work, and there needs to be some safety nets for people who we ostracize, people who live under our veil of reality, you know. That is majority of the human race. Even people as naive as pop stars are waking up to that idea now, which is unprecedented because they've never cared about these things before.
I'm so sorry about that. Oreo was just trying to break some stuff. Here. He's trying to jump off and bounce items off. Sorry, you were saying?
I was just saying how much I like Britney Spears again, honestly.
Yeah, I like
because
actually. But also, I understand.
Even naive pop stars like her are now.
Is she naive though? I do not think so. She's had a lot of struggles in her life, and she's a big advocate for LGBT society. Despite not being bi or known to be bi, she's not a lesbian. We all know that. But even then, she advocates very heavily for the LGBTQI and so many other organizations. I do think that a lot of movie stars have woken up because we saw that Hollywood actually just crashed during this time. I think they have a $90 million loss during these 2 months. I'm not sure. Please research on that. But there has been.
When you say a lot of, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say a lot of celebrities have woken up like that, that brings me back to that particular imperialist mantra that when a crisis hits, you go for people who are like really privileged, really influential, and they come and they tell you that we're all in the same boat, we're all in this together, we have each other, da da da, and that's how they destroy. I mean, I'm sorry to be a pessimist here, but I don't really trust people who are in a place of influence. I think that is like the skeptical communist in me. That makes me really, really skeptical and gives me paranoia about celebrities. But it's good if they are actually really waking up to this idea, and it's not like manufactured by certain puppeteers to make people believe that everything's okay in a very imperialist kind of a way. I want to believe that it's actually a certain radical social change that's coming from the bottom up and from top down, you know, for everyone.
Right, I absolutely agree. But it's also interesting that you mentioned Britney Spears, who has just now said some statement about like this. Whereas for years, Keanu Reeves was giving half of his earnings to charity, and yet nobody talks about him. God knows what he has done for coronavirus. I do not know, but it would be interesting to find out.
Good man.
He has been doing so many things for the people. He takes public transport. He didn't believe in his privilege as a movie star to take over his entire lifestyle. You actually have Hollywood parents who do not spoil their children with Christmas gifts and an exorbitant amount of money every month. They're actually very frugal in how they raise their kids because they do not want their kids to grow up and then, realize that, oh, this was all just a sham, maybe. I do not know exactly what they think, but it's interesting to see how people like Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher do not want to give their kids too much, right? That's also a philosophy. You have Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt who adopted so many children. Whatever happened later was obviously terrible, but at the same time, have so much going on as well. But yes, you actually want to know more about these people just because of the standing that they have in society. This is our new royalty. This is what is considered to be the new imperialism, if I may say so. There's a reason why Hollywood and even Bollywood spend so much money on making movies and on their movie stars and on beauty standards and all of these other things, because they do rule the world in some ways. You have all these beauty pageants that have taken over. Surprisingly, it was only this year that a Black woman ever made it as a Miss Universe, was it, or Miss World? But that's amazing because I actually saw her interview with Trevor Noah, and it was heartbreaking. A lot of people thought that just because of her color, just because she was from Africa, she would not win. And they were going to bring her down and bring her back to reality that, okay, fine, you're working hard, but just know that the result will not be what you think it will be. It hasn't been for centuries. Why would that change now? Right? And then it does change. So I think that we look up to them. So we want to know more about what they have to say. We want to know more about how they're coping with the situation. It does affect them as much as it affects us in some ways. I mean, not as
And that's really
badly.
interesting to know, like especially the beauty pageant you mentioned. Very interesting to know because before the crisis, I don't know how things are going to be afterwards. I mean, I hope that we don't fall into a certain technocratic barbarism after this, and that is a big threat according to some social scientists. But it's interesting to know that ethnocentrism was on the rise before this thing happened. So amidst that zeitgeist, a woman of color actually won a beauty pageant, and you're saying I don't follow beauty pageants all that much, but it's for the first time you mentioned. That's brilliant to know. So that's very interesting. That's a great piece of information. Thank you for sharing that. That gives me some hope.
Yeah, but again, that shows that we were on a new age. And I think that if anything, the quarantine has just sort of Im augmented that in some ways. It has
Mm.
brought in light. It has told us exactly what is important, what is not important. Currently, beauty creams are not important at all. People are not going to their barbers; they're cutting their hair at home. So you also have debunked that beauty myth that oh, acha, you have to look a certain way, or you have to have a haircut, you have to look pretty for the screen, for whatever you have to do. Or that has also taken a
It all
setback. A lot of
it all
comedians
comes
are now
back to
saying, yeah.
their self-esteem and how that is supported, how you get catharsis, and just that that comes from obviously like beautification of how you look. I do that. I try to dress well when I go to work. I'm sure you do too. That comes from how much money you have, how socioeconomically successful you are, so on and so forth. And that goes away in a crisis or in a psychological or sociological crisis. It doesn't have to be the plague. Um, so I honestly think that if people start getting their self-esteem from altruism, and we can see like when we were talking earlier before this, when we were talking on the phone, you mentioned that there's like this reservoir of altruism that's opened up now where people are helping each other, and actually finding meaning and purpose in that. So if people get their self-esteem from helping each other, loving each other, supporting each other, and they realize that that is one of the only important things that we have in this absurdity of existence, the world can be a better place. I'm not talking about some utopia where people sit together and sing kumbaya. That's not possible. That's against our archetype. But
Hmm.
if some dominant aspects of our societal reality do that, if only a handful of people do that and do that well, then we wouldn't have to look for lame excuses and then lame solutions like philanthropy, of welfare, things like that. We wouldn't have to, I think. We just need to find self-esteem and meaning in altruism. Do you think that's so hard to do? Especially now, like in a crisis when we're doing that and we're feeling good about it. Do you think it's so hard to do?
It's not hard to do at all. I'm actually very happy
Yeah.
with how many people actually woken up. I get messages from everyone that please donate to our cause. We want to give rations to 50 people today. There's an organization that only works on providing for transgenders, and that's a really good initiative
Mm.
too because no
Excellent.
one really thinks about giving them rations when, uh, when you're giving things out, and now they are. So I think that that's very, very good. But we can do it on a regular basis too. We don't have to wait for a crisis to fall on our heads and then do it, or do it in some holy months that oh, this is the month in which I will give my
Mm.
new back to society. I think that that's a very wrong initiative to take because now there's a crisis, and we also know that Ramzan is coming. So I know a lot of people have actually delayed their donations, thinking that they're going to give it in those days because it might be beneficial for them in the afterlife, maybe. And I feel like that is so selfish because you don't have to wait that long. There are people who need it now. I'm sure God is also looking and thinking that just give it now and I'll probably, count it as just as much. We have cases where there have been plagues and the prophets had to donate in the past. And when they did, they were given much more than what they had first invested. So if you think about it from a very religious point of view and look at only religious scriptures, it's clearly shown that you do not need certain days to give out donations, to be nice to your neighbors, to be nice to that poor woman at the end of the road. You can just do it on a regular basis too. Some people are also holding back their donations because they think that everybody else is doing it, so I do not need to do so much. And I feel like that is also something that is very problematic because other people can also only do so much. So unless everybody does not take part, I do not see this trend changing. I know a lot of people are just waiting. And again, it's fine if you cannot do something because a lot of people have also been laid off. I saw on LinkedIn just yesterday that there was a sort of like a semi-strike, where this one company, it's a software house based somewhere else, and they have a small office here in Lahore.
Hmm.
350 people were laid off, and they were thinking that how do we go about our life now? That company said that we did not have a very good economic period in the last 2 to 3 months, which is why those people were laid off. However, the one accountant spoke up and said that they actually were in a big profit. So much so that the CEO and whoever was in charge of the Lahore office did not have to change their lifestyle, even like 1% during this lockdown. And yet they were laying off people. And now they're
Hmm.
rehiring. They're rehiring people who they just to make up for the space that they had, to the people that they actually laid off. So if I wanted to get a job there, I could very easily do so now. And that's really shameful if you think about it. People have written to those people that please take us back. If you're giving new jobs, you can obviously take the old ones back too. So reevaluate our performance and take us back if you need people. But just laying off 350 people, they're just gone. Now they cannot donate, obviously. I do not expect them to. They also have their families to worry about. You also have all of this happening. People are also uh, right now, even right now during this time, the goal is software maximization. And what does that really tell you? The companies, one of the managers of the company said that even if we wanted to pay you guys, we couldn't because we ourselves are not getting paid. And that was a big fat lie because they were getting paid too. It was just the actual workers, the actual employees who were suffering, and not the managerial position people, not those in leadership positions. So that's also very problematic, and you can think about those things and we ponder over them. But that's also happening. Why are people being laid off when people need resources the most right now? I know that a lot of people in America took this into consideration, and when they would go out to eat, they would tip extra right before the lockdown took place, just so the waiters and the waitresses could survive just a little bit longer.
So my only and that's wonderful. It's wonderful when you see morality coming out in people like that, in philanthropy, in tips, in all of that. What really pains me is that it shouldn't really come to that. It shouldn't really come to individual support and individual conscience. It's brilliant when it does, and people are heroic in when they come out and help and when they do social work and all that. I'm just saying it shouldn't really come to that. I mean, we have systems, socioeconomic systems that we try really hard to sustain, and systems are designed in a way to sustain themselves. And I'm talking about capitalism, consumerism, nationalism, ethnocentrism, all of that. There should be systems in place, meta systems that actually make sure that people are sustained as well. That make sure that people don't go to bed hungry. That make sure that people have a roof over their head. And I understand that a lot of people are getting laid off, and we do live in an economic zeitgeist, and not everybody can help other people. That's fine. If one thing that you can get from this crisis is that you understand a need, not a sense, not a desire, but a need for empathy, for a need to understand that your problem is everybody's problem, and everybody's problem is your problem, and we're all in a way, and I'm not talking about like some mumbo jumbo hippy trippy logic, but we're all connected in a way. If somebody is staying in a homeless shelter in California and in a pandemic, then that can have adverse effects on you sitting in your little flat in London, or on you sitting in your massive villa in Lahore, whatever, like that can be detrimental to you. And if we can just take that one lesson of empathy from all of this, I think then all of this wouldn't be for a waste. And again, not being dismissive of people who've lost their lives, but that little good should come from this, I think.
I absolutely agree with you. I don't think there's any thought that should be given to exactly how much we should give. Everybody should be doing their bit. Everyone should do exactly how much they can do. It's sad that people are actually calculating their savings and how much they should be giving. It's not something that you should calculate right now. People need it, especially in a country like Pakistan, where you know how things are. I know how things are.
Oh
You
yeah.
just walk down. I just walk 5 minutes from my house, and there's somebody asking me for some money so that they can afford their family of 5 or 8 or 10 people. Their children on the roads begging, they're not in school because their parents cannot afford to send them anywhere. School costs money. Even if your education is free, you still have to have a bag, you still have to have books, you still have to have some stationery. And many
Stationary.
people cannot invest on those things. Absolutely. Some of us are lucky enough and privileged enough to have these things given to us. We have parents who 4 centers to school. It's a luxury in Pakistan. Not everybody affords it. Not everybody can. You see how government schools even run, and it's not very good. They hardly have qualified teachers. Everything's done on. There's nothing being done at all, actually, come to think of it. There are a lot of charity schools. They do their bit, but again, they do probably like about 5% of what is actually needed. And that's a lot because we're a big country. We have 220 million people living here, out of which, if you calculate the 10%, which is the very, very, very well to do, that comes up to what? A very, very, very few handful of people. Yeah, exactly. It's a very
Yeah,
big pyramid.
yeah,
And then you have so many people who need those resources. We do not have basic housing. If you cannot afford a house, you go straight to a tent in this barren land. That's just the way things are.
and
It's really hard.
what annoys me, especially when you talk about Pakistan and third world countries like that, what annoys me is that people who are privileged, like socioeconomically privileged in these places, some of them are either too naive to understand the kind of responsibility they have, responsibility because there aren't systems in place to help people under them. So the responsibility they have given to them, they don't understand it. Or even if they do understand, they don't feel an obligation to do anything about it. And that really annoys me because, like, it is kind of a moral responsibility if you think about it, and
Absolutely.
it should come to you. And maybe, and I might be over romanticizing this, but I think maybe through this quarantine, because this is a brutally unifying phenomena that's happening now in the world. Maybe through this quarantine and through this plague, people might wake up to that idea that it is their moral responsibility to sustain people around them. And if everybody can do their bit, then things can be more or less bad than they are right now.
It definitely should be. I do not know exactly how what they're doing about it. I do not know exactly whether they are doing much about it anyway. We see some movie stars and some pop singers now come up on national TV and talk about how they have opened this new charity to support everybody. So please, pitch in. Shahida Fidi talked about going to Kohat and other areas and supporting people there.
Hope,
A lot of
hope not
journalists
out.
have also, huh?
Hope not out. I think his charity is called
I
Afridi.
think so too. Yeah, he's doing it with a few other
That's good.
national
Good for him.
leaders.
Good for him. Yeah.
Absolutely. Again, a lot of journalists who have given a lot of support, they are actually finding solutions. This is probably the first time ever that I'm actually hearing journalists talk about solutions on this larger scale and not just talk about politics and not just talk about what can be done. They're actually giving politicians solutions. They tell them that we do not want to hear you nitpick on what the other people are doing. We want to know more about what you are doing. And I think I've never seen people do that before. Uh, on the other hand, when you said that the upper class is naive and not doing much, I think
Some,
that's a very,
some are
I
at
think
least.
that's sort of giving them a leverage. That's like saying that, oh, they don't really have to because they don't understand. I think that takes away a
Mm,
lot. Yeah, I do not think that they're naive at all. They've always known, but they've been so scared of
mm.
losing their own positions if they do so much, right? Like look at Keanu Reeves again, going
Dominance
back there.
hierarchy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You will lose your status as a movie star if you do too much for other people. People will not probably take you
Mm.
that seriously when it comes to these things. They might take the Kardashians more seriously, and yeah. So those things are all something to look at because it shows how movie stars also have this image to uphold. They have to have these amazing grand parties. They have to give each other really expensive gifts. They have to wear the latest brands, no matter how many animals died to make that one dress. You have to have it, and you have to wear it to a sure. So they also have those responsibilities to uphold, also created by capitalism, no doubt. But then again, you also see that I've actually talked to a few people about this, and I told them that we should do something now before it's too late. And a lot of people said to me that you are crazy to think so. I'm not going to name them. They said that you should only think about your own families right now because survival of the fittest. You should vote for your families. There's no point in doing so much, especially when you do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. This
Yeah.
person is privileged, so they obviously got some pictures from a country, from a first world country. I'm not going to name it, and and it showed that those supermarkets in that first world country were empty. So she said that this is what's happening in the world, and I cannot let that happen here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to fill 2 trolleys in and bring it home.
So
So
I know
if
this
you
place you're talking about because we have spoken about this. So I,
Yes.
not naming her, I want to say one thing to her though, if this reaches her somehow, some way.
I hope
I
not.
want to say, I hope not. I hope not. I know you are that person is in your social circle, your professional circle. I do want to say one thing though. I mean, to everybody of that sort. Listen, I believe in individuality. That's fine. I get it. I get why you have to look out for yourself. That's your archetype, survival of the fittest, and all that. But listen, for fuck's sake, listen. Excuse my French. If there is COVID-19 or leprosy or polio or anything of that sort prevalent in your society, in your community, in your bloody race, then it's a threat to you, your children, your children's children, right? If you have a big diesel guzzling car and you're killing the planet, your children, or their children are going to suffer because of that. If you're hoarding toilet paper and hand sanitizers and it can't reach to the poor communities, poor localities who shop day to day, they might get coronavirus, and then it might come to you. Everybody's connected in a way, and you can see that brutally manifesting itself during a plague like the coronavirus. If somebody is affected by something, you will eventually be affected by it. You don't live in a secluded universe. You don't live in a bubble. You might call, when I talk about communion, and when I talk about commonality of the human race, brotherhood of the human race, and how we are one meta-organism, you might consider this as some hippie nonsense, but think about it. If one person is in danger from COVID-19, from polio, from leprosy, what have you, throughout history, you can see that. One person is in danger, everyone's in danger. If one person goes to bed hungry, they might be resentful, they might become a terrorist, they might crash into your twin towers. If one person is socioeconomically deprived, everybody's in danger. The only way to survive and to live a more or less peaceful and happy and contented life is to make sure that everybody has at least some baseline contentment. Without that, you cannot survive. You cannot survive with individuality. As much as you'd want to and you'd want to believe it, it's just not possible. That's just not how societies, complex societies work. And we know that. We have examples in it from history, and we have to learn that lesson now more than ever. Because like even before the COVID-19 hit, you can see the environmental crisis. You can see the bushfires in Australia, snow caps melting and all that. We were in a crisis long before COVID-19 hit. This is just one little tip of the iceberg, you know. This is, I think, and I've said this before, this is a full dress rehearsal for Armageddon, because this is probably as bad as things can get without it not coming back to some kind of normality. Most of us would probably come back to some version of normality after this. This is like a full dress rehearsal for us to please, for fuck's sake, transcend, excuse my French, transcend from your individuality, understand that you cannot survive without having some kind of commonality, I think. I'm sorry, but this really frustrates me
You
because
are
there are still people
absolutely
out there
right. We should not apologize because you're right.
who believe
It
in
is
that.
the biggest wake-up call that we could have gotten without affecting us
Honestly.
directly. But we also
Yeah.
had a very big, uh, I do not know what to call it. It was comical. It was sad. It was something or the other. You know about the fashion designer I'm talking about, probably, about how she sent her cook on two
Oh
buses to
yeah,
go to
yeah,
his
yeah, yeah.
visit, and she kept crying that he might have coronavirus and I might have it too. In her video, she talked about how she had to pay for his test. But then when she talked about paying for his test, there was a big chandelier, as big as it gets in anyone's house. Just right behind her, she had these high ceiling walls. She had this beautiful garden that you could see in the video. She was so well dressed in that video. Um, I was like thinking to myself that she just had to give, it was as much money as one dress in her shop costs.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting to see that she had to say that on social media that, oh, I paid for his test. If you were not going to, who was going to? Now, thankfully,
Yeah.
that cook turned out to be negative and the whole idea died, but people did resent her a lot for saying those things that she did, for her lack of empathy, for sending him home and not
You're not
thinking even
you're not
once about the hundreds of people who he might affect when he goes back home in his village, as well as the 50 or
you're
so
not wearing
travelers
her clothes, are you?
during the.
Is this out of curiosity, you're not wearing her clothes, are you?
No, I'm not. No, I have actually
Okay.
never bought anything from her shop. I do
Okay.
not think I've actually ever even got anything as a gift from her
Okay.
boutique. I do not recall ever wearing it. But yes, a lot of my
Okay.
friends, a lot of people that I know have
Yeah,
bought her
very
clothes. I
popular.
do
It's very popular.
admire the idea behind it. I read some time ago, I think it was in an eight, that she was talking about how, as a female entrepreneur, she has actually given job to 20,000 men who work for her. Now, I do not know the condition that they work for her in. I do not want to comment on those at all. I do not know. I do not think that they were good at all, because embroidery is very hard work and it takes arduous
Yeah.
hours. I do not know how well paid they were, considering her statement on how much money she was not willing to spend on her cook. But those things are all something that I have to be taken into consideration. A lot of people did say that her house is big enough to give him a certain room where he could have been quarantined until the test results came, but that was not given to him. He did not even have that one room. She just shipped him off to his village, which was not a very good way of doing things. She kept talking about how much it cost her, not in terms of his test, but also in terms of his travel, the packing cost, the sending of his things. And that's a very small price to pay. I and do not understand why. And she was doing it for her own self. She was doing it so that her kids do not get coronavirus. She was doing it for her husband. She was doing it for herself. It wasn't a social uh, scheme that she was running. So I do not know what the whole hype was about in her video. Um, Similarly, a lot of people have actually brought in a lot of satirical memes on her as well. So you see, people are doing things. I do not want to comment on how much they are doing things. I think that all of us, including us, can do a lot more than what we are doing. If we put ourselves in the shoes
For
of
sure.
that one who lives down the street, we would know exactly how things are. We do not take minimum wage in Pakistan very seriously. We have it. There's a set limit, but a lot of people work under that limit because they do not think that they have a choice. No one goes to court with these cases because of the law and justice system in Pakistan. Not to say it's really bad, it is not that bad, but at the same time, it takes too long to win a case. It takes too long to bring someone to justice. There's a lot of bribery as well. You can buy out a jury if you have the means to do so. So things are not looking so good. A lot of people are now harping on their savings. They are not using it as well as they could have. It's problematic. No one's questioning their morality right now. They all think that this is not something to be talked about. But if not now, then when? So when you brought on how we should all think a certain way now, how we should all behave a certain way now, how we should look back at how we've been living so far, yes, we should. If I could afford 1,000 rupees per day on coffee in my not so quarantine days, I can definitely think about contributing all that money into providing for my uh, sweetresses, children's health. There's a lot of work being done for thalassemia patients right now. There's a shortage of
Yeah.
fresh blood. No one's actually going around and donating blood right now because, again, coronavirus, you can get it from anywhere. So about, I think, 200 children in this one facility who are being supplied with fresh blood for their to combat their thalassemia are no longer being supplied that fresh blood. But this one woman whose child goes there said that I went there every 2 weeks because they would also give me a little bit of ration. So she said that I'm scared to take my child with me now, but I still like to go there every 2 weeks and bring something back for my children. So you have those things to consider too. People are not looking at this the way they should. So you're absolutely right in saying what you just did. This is a big wake up call, and it shouldn't
I
be
want to
done just in
say
time to fight kids.
I want to say
Sorry.
one thing. I'm sorry I keep interrupting you, but I do want to say one
No,
thing.
I don't.
Um, we might never really know what is the meaning of existence, like why we exist, why everything exists. Like might not never know, we might never know, other than what physics tells us, we might never know. But I think if we can just find meaning in some certain basic altruism, without any political or economic rhetoric attached to it, I personally think, and I'm not an expert in anything, but I think that is noble. There's some very humane archetypal nobility in that. If that is one thing, if you were to rely on one thing, if you were to have one anchor that keeps you afloat, um, from all the abstract uncertainty of the world, and it's always been uncertain and abstract and chaotic. There's one thing that can keep you afloat, and if that thing is being empathetic and a little helpful, having a little bit of altruism in you, for other people, then I think that is a noble enough anchor, so to speak. And if we can take one thing from this quarantine, and we don't have to, as long as you survive, that's okay, right? You survive the plague. But if you can survive it, and some of your morality can survive or be replenished along with it, I think then all the people that have lost the battle, and it's horrible to COVID-19, and it's horrible, I'm not being dismissive of that, but maybe their deaths or their crises or their hardships wouldn't be completely in vain.
Absolutely.
That's just my opinion.